and welcome to our special report, Through Their Eyes, Teens Talking Violence.
Throughout our increased gun violence in the capital region this past year, we have heard from police, activists, politicians, but we have not heard from the people dealing with the trauma of these shootings, the children living in the crossfire.
Since June of 2020, the streets of Albany and Troy have been particularly dangerous for people 18 years old and younger. In Troy, 3 school-aged children were shot to death, including an 11-year-old, and a 12-year-old was left paralyzed by gunfire. During the same time period, 17 people 18 years old and younger were also shot. 4 died. All were innocent victims of gun violence, shot while walking down a street, in a parked car, even in their own home.
The latest victims, in fact, 18 and 15 years old, both killed in Albany. So what toll is this taking on our young people, and what do they think are the solutions?
We brought together 6 teenagers who live in some of the neighborhoods touched by violence in Albany. News 10 ABC's Louis Finley sat down with them for a candid conversation about what they've experienced and their greatest fears of living with gun violence.
Now, throughout this special report, we're going to show you the resources available to prevent young people from becoming victims, as well as how to help police solve these horrific crimes.
And Louis Finley will join us later for a discussion. But right now, let's head to the Albany Boys and Girls Club and meet the teens.
I'm Krista, and I want to be a music producer when I grow up.
My name's Eli, and I want to be a professional drummer.
I'm Brandon Cataldo, and I would like to be a voice actor when I grow up.
I'm Taraya Pittman, and I want to be a lawyer when I grow up.
My name is Amir Halal. I want to be a psychologist when I grow up.
Hi, my name is Johnny Taplin, and I want to be a baker.
They come from different parts of the city of Albany. But these 6 teens all have one thing in common. They live in communities where people have been shot and killed. The gun violence hitting close to home for some.
By a show of hands, how many know someone who's been impacted by gun violence? So 4 of you. Can you tell me a little bit about that, who it was and how you know them?
My cousin, he got shot. He got shot through his windshield.
Is he okay? How's he doing?
Nah, he passed away a couple years ago.
And how was that for you?
I mean, I wasn't really close to him, but I mean, he had a place in my heart though.
My uncle, he was at a nightclub and he ended up getting shot in his arm, and then by that he ended up having a major heart attack as his hands that time that he passed away.
About how long ago was that?
This was like 3 years ago.
How about you?
I had a friend named Destiny Green. She was shot recently. I haven't really seen her since 3rd grade, but, you know, she was still a friend of mine, so it still hurt a little.
Destiny Green was killed in May. The 15-year-old from Latham is one of 2 teens from the capital region killed this year after being shot. Green, along with Jasleen Cower from Castleton-on-the-Hudson, are some of the more than 600 teens nationwide aged 12 to 17 who have been killed this year. The information is compiled by the Gun Violence Archive. It's a nonprofit which tracks shootings across the country. The Gun Violence Tracker also lists close to 1,600 teens who have been injured in shootings, another 2 coming from the capital region.
So when you hear the latest news, there were 2, an 18 and a 15-year-old passed away, a friend of yours. What goes through your head when you hear something like that?
The very idea of that is terrifying, like just knowing that it could be your friend.
Do you not go certain places? Do you not do certain things? Are you hyper aware of where you are?
I don't really go out by myself anymore, and if I do go out, only if I need to.
Ever since all these killings, especially last month, I'm scared to go outside.
Breaking news, an 11-year-old boy was killed in a drive-by shooting in Troy last night.
It's more than just what they see on the news. The homicides in their communities is something they say impacts their daily lives.
What's the conversation like with your friends when you hear about a shooting?
Most of the time we talk about the shooting, and then like after a while we get ready to disperse and leave each other. We like stay safe, bro.
I just like the same thing to my friends when we like depart from each other. It's like stay safe and
say the same thing.
See them.
Is this something that's happened, this heightened awareness happened in the past year, in the past couple months, or have you always been like this?
I always felt like this, but this like increased it a little bit more to like a certain extent.
For me, I know like from all like the school shootings, I've been a little bit scared to go to school, but now like it's in my community, I'm kind of scared to like leave my house too.
What's the conversation like with your parents? Do they bring it up to you? Do you bring it up to them?
It's kind of like a mutual thing. My mom always tells me to be careful when we go out.
Like, my mom don't want me to fear of a whole bunch of that stuff, even though it happens in my community.
Yeah, my mother sometimes tells us to stay away from certain streets.
Yeah, she keeps where I go very scarce. You know, she doesn't really let me go places that's out of her reach for her to get to.
Victims of gun violence are getting younger and younger. 11-year-old Aishan Davis killed last summer. 18-year-old China Forney killed last month. Youth killed before they could even graduate. Parents of teens are now faced with finding a safe space outside of school and home for their kids to be kids.
Does coming to a place like the Boys and Girls Club kind of give you a safe space to come to?
Really a safe spot in general. Like, it doesn't even have to be related to like the violence and the virus or anything. It could just be an easy like gateway to escape from any forms of stress.
I feel like when I'm in Albany, I feel like, you know, when I walk up to the neighborhood and I come here, I feel like this is a safe environment to get away from the danger that's around, you know, in the community. So I try my best to get here as fast as I can so I can feel at ease.
When you say to get here as fast as you can, is there something in your mind that thinks from point A to point B something might happen?
It could be. Nowadays, you know, anything could happen. You could easily be walking down the street and something could happen. So to prevent all that, I make my way here and back.
Basically, it sounds like you go
Like from school, here.
and then home.
Yep.
Coming up, we're talking about peer pressure. If you're looking for resources, check out Parsons Child and Family Center. It offers programs for both parents and children. Also, join the conversation over on Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag #ThroughTheirEyes. Today's teens can be seen creating TikToks, doing a viral challenge, and something like playing a good old video game never goes out of style. But a year during a pandemic, added with the social unrest and the rise in gun violence, have these teens saying they're worried in which should be their carefree years.
What's it like being a teen right now? Tell me a little bit about that. What's it like in your everyday life? Living in COVID, we have a lot of gun violence happening around.
It's been hell. It's literally the worst experience ever. Like, this past year and a half has been brutal at best. From like the news, from like how people were handling the virus initially, to all the events that were breaking out, to the election. It's been a mess from start to finish, and it's still a mess even now.
Aside from all that's going on in the community, I feel like as a teenager, I'm doing just fine.
For me, it's been a challenge, but I think through the pandemic, I've like grown a lot as well. So that's a positive thing about it too.
Now that you bring up a positive, what are the positive things that are going on? I mean, you hear just about so much bad in the world. What's good that's happening in your lives that you can tell me about?
I took care of a bunch of problems that I had going on in my life. I'm not going to go into too many details, but it was like more like a health kind of thing, but things got better in that area.
You know, I try to like expand my options now that I'm in high school. I'm a freshman in high school, so I want to like do things that a high schooler would do on average. You know, like do sports and things like that.
Peer pressure is still alive and well. The group says they see the pitfalls of succumbing to peer pressure and they know who they need to avoid. Though they know who to steer clear from, the bad choices of others can impact their lives.
Do you guys get any peer pressure? Do you know anyone who's been peer pressured at all? There's also these 19, 18, 17-year-olds that are getting involved in this. Do you see or hear anything about the other side?
I don't associate myself with those type of people.
And do you know in your schools who are the guys or girls to like stay away from to stay on the right track?
Certainly.
Especially the image they print out for themselves.
They make themselves known pretty easily on that they're not a good influence. Like, it's easy to tell like who's a good influence and who isn't.
I talked to the chief and he said that there are gangs in here in Albany. Are you aware of any of that going on?
I'm aware that there's gangs around, but I don't affiliate myself with them.
Yeah.
I'm aware to an extent what kind of games or what they do that I'm not the most aware on.
So for those of you who know about gangs, what do you think's not being told to people out there that could better protect them? It kind of seems like there's this shadow or a curtain that's not talked about.
Like, some people believe that they can just leave it, drop it. I feel like there's a process, that there's something holding them back. They can easily leave what they're affiliated with as a gang relative. They could easily part themselves, but they can't. There's something that's shackling them to that gang association that makes them stay.
The Albany Police Department says the number of people injured in shootings rose 110% in 2020. 27 people were shot so far this year in the city. 2 of the incidents were considered mass shootings.
What is your biggest hope and your biggest fear coming out of this past year with all the gun violence, the 2 girls who were recently killed, the many more that have been shot over this past year who are your age, around your age?
My biggest hope is that it stops. My biggest fear that it keeps continuing, gets worse or more frequent.
My biggest hope is that all the gun violence just stops, and my biggest fear is just like one day it's gonna be one of my family members.
My biggest fear is that it could be any of us next. It could be me, it could be you, it could be anybody, and I'm hoping that it doesn't become one of us next.
I agree with everyone else. My biggest hope is that all of this comes to an end eventually, like things actually go back to normal. And my biggest fear is that it's somebody that I know and that I care about deeply that really hits home.
My biggest fear is that either me or one of my family members or my mom gets, killed.
I just hope justice gets served.
What is justice for you guys? What does justice look like?
Just a little something that shows that, it was recognized. We didn't look over what's going on.
It's acknowledging the problem and also taking action to help solve the problem, or if completely solving is not possible, just lessen the extent of the problem.
Coming up, the final moments with our teens. If they could say one thing to lawmakers, what would that be? For additional resources, check out the Boys and Girls Club of the Capital area, offering youth programs throughout its 19 locations. And join the conversation over on our Twitter and Facebook using the hashtag #ThroughTheirEyes.
How do you have a conversation with a parent or a guardian when something happens? And how important is it to have those conversations with an adult?
It's important to talk about these things and acknowledge that it's a problem.
It's important to talk about it because you never know. Gunshots don't got a name. The bullets don't got a name. It could be one of us at one point.
It's conversations that need to be had, so that way more awareness gets spread about the problem.
My mom would notice that I'm emotionally distraught from what's going on. And maybe she'll bring it up like, hey, how you feeling? You all right? Do you want to talk about it? And then that's how the conversations usually lead off.
What do you think the one thing's missing that people just aren't seeing, that the adults aren't seeing?
I think that parents are missing that there's a trigger to everything, and something is sparking them inside to do these things.
Something happened within the family that sparked them to do it.
Well, now that you bring that up, what is it? Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it not knowing how to have proper conflict resolution? What do you think's that reason that they're going out and shooting people?
I think it's more the anger, they don't know how to process their emotions well, and they just act out. Or
These people that got guns going around shooting people, they probably got a whole bunch of anger inside of them and don't want to take it out on the person that they got the problem with. They want to take it on somebody that they don't know.
Maybe they have some trauma of some sorts. That could be a big factor.
They feel like this is their only resort to let out whatever they have, maybe despair or revenge, anything.
If you could say one thing to the person who shot your cousin or the person who shot your friend or somebody you knew, what would you say to that person?
I won't have anything to say. I don't have any words to say because no words could fathom how I feel. So,
how would you describe how you feel?
empty.
What about you?
Oh, I have nothing to say. Cause it's gonna be hard because like she said, it's like words can't explain how I feel.
For those leaders, the chief, the mayor, if you had a moment that you could say something to them, what would it be? Because they're out there working to get guns off the street, but you know they have a big task on their hands.
I just feel like there's nothing they can do. Like, they've been trying out their best, I feel, but they could at least put a little bit more effort into trying to monitor the community and track down what's going on when it's happening.
It's like a problem that you can't exactly fully prevent. You can like take action all you want, but there's always going to be a way to get past that action that was taken.
Does the violence kind of make you want to move, or do you want to stay here and try and make things better?
I feel like I'm okay where I am because I endured it for so long. I feel like I can handle it now.
I want to move, but if we don't sit here and like make a pause or like stop it right now, if we just move and run from this situation, it's just gonna get bigger and bigger and lead on to more tragic things.
It's a pretty tough conversation.
Here's the thing. Leaving the area, moving away, that won't solve anything. If anything, that'll just make it worse.
I agree.
So I'll definitely be staying here for a long while, just because I want to do whatever I can to help this area. Things are way too bad now to just walk away and leave the situation alone.
Now that we're kind of at the end of this, how are you feeling? How are you feeling, like, emotionally, if you would describe that?
I'm not really sure. I like that we got to talk about this. Because I know sometimes it's not talked about enough.
This conversation isn't always the easiest one to have, but it's got to be done eventually. We can't just keep ignoring it. So I'm glad we talked about it.
This conversation was a start because we all got to start somewhere, and I feel like just getting our word across will just fill in the gap just a little more.
Glad you came. Show of hands. Okay. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lewis. Powerful insight from those teens.
Now, we're going to be discussing their thoughts with Lewis when we come back. But first, for anyone out there who maybe has witnessed or has information about a crime in their community, we want to remind you about the Capital Region Crime Stoppers. You can contact them in a number of ways, all right there on your screen.
Anything you offer is always anonymous and always appreciated. We're back in a moment. Welcome back. Lewis Finley joins us now, and what an inspiring group of teens.
You know, they really were, Lydia and John.
So we hope this starts a conversation for parents and their teens, but we know it is a difficult one to have. How does the Boys and Girls Club play a role in this?
Well, one thing that David Gordon, who heads up the Delaware Avenue location, said is it takes a village. So it's important not only to have an adult figure at home, but having somebody outside the home is very important as well. Somebody who the kids can look up to and someone who they trust.
And they don't always want to talk to the parents, but he might be a friend that they can say, look, I want to confide in you. Anything surprise you in this story? Usually when you go into these things, something jumps out and you say, I didn't expect to hear that from someone. How about you?
The one thing that I will say not only inspired me, but also was kind of a sense of hope at the end is I asked the kids, you know, where do you want to move outside the city seeing all this violence? And they said, you know, I don't want to do that. I think that I want to stay here because staying here, I can be a part of the change. You know, a 12-year-old, Amir, he said, you know, I actually want to move outside the city, but staying here can help solve some of the issues. So we could see maybe a new mayor, a future mayor,
Sure.
a future council member. So it's very inspiring to hear from these kids.
While they don't want to move, it was so hard to hear in their own words how their basic daily lives are impacted by this gun violence.
Yeah, you know, growing up for me, Columbine was a big thing. And for the kids, they're afraid of being shot in school. But with this rise in gun violence, they're not only scared of being shot in school, but also in their own communities, which is pretty tough to hear.
Just being afraid to walk to the corner. You know?
Yeah.
It is. Lewis, now we know the conversation does not end here. Mayor Kathy Sheehan and Chief Eric Hawkins will join News 10 ABC in the morning, and we will hear their reactions from tonight's special.
Wonderful work with Lewis. Thank you
you.
for watching. Have a good night.